$35 trillion. That's trillion with a T. This is the current number of the national debt for the United States federal government. To put that number in perspective, if you wanted to count to 35 trillion, counting one number per second without stopping, it would take you over 1 million years to reach it. $35 trillion in national debt. What does it even mean? Why is it important? How does it matter to you? We will explore what should concern you most about this astonishing number and where you can find hope on this episode of the Field Journal Podcast.
Navigate these uncharted times of chaos and confusion with the Field Journal Podcast, where each episode we decipher the events unfolding all around us with the steadfast truth of the kingdom story. Together, we'll focus on developing an eternal perspective so we can have peace and hope despite our circumstances. Now here's your guide, Kirk Buckner.
Welcome to the Field Journal Podcast, where we observe the world through the lens of the kingdom story so we can have clarity, peace, and hope in these unprecedented times. On July 29, 2024, the national debt of the United States surpassed $35 trillion for the very first time in history. What does that even mean? Why is it important, and how does it matter to you? The U.S. national debt is defined as the total amount of money that the federal government owes to creditors. It's the accumulation of annual budget deficits, which occur when the federal government spends more money than it receives. The national debt is comprised of two primary components. One is the public debt, the portion of the national debt that is held by the public, including individuals, businesses, foreign governments, and financial institutions. Think of public debt as those entities who bought debt and are looking for a return on investment to make a profit. The second category is intergovernmental holdings. This is the portion of the national debt that is owed to various government funds and programs like Medicare or Social Security. This represents money that the federal government has borrowed from its own programs. With the national debt at $35 trillion and based on current population statistics, this equates to $104,497 per person who is a citizen of the United States of America. That's $266,275 per household, and if you took out all of the current adult-paying taxpayers and just left children, they would be left with $483,889 per child. The debt 1 year ago was $32.65 trillion, meaning that the debt has increased by $2.35 trillion over the past 12 months. This rate of increase equates to $196 billion in new debt per month, $6.4 billion in new debt per day, $268 million in new debt per hour, $4.5 million in new debt per minute, and $74,401 in new debt per second. These numbers come from a report issued by the House Budget Committee Chairman Jody Arrington, who said, quote, "Today, we grieve yet another dubious milestone in the fiscal decline of the most powerful and prosperous nation in history. President Reagan's words $34 trillion ago still hold true today. We don't have $1 trillion debt because we haven't taxed enough. We have $1 trillion debt because we spend too much." End quote. Let me provide you one more example on how staggering this number really is. If you started from the birth of Jesus 2,000 years ago and spent $1 million every single day, you still would not have spent just $1 trillion. Instead, if you had $1 million to spend per day and you wanted to get to $35 trillion, it would take you approximately 95,890 years to spend it. Wow. This begs the question, how did we get here? The United States incurred its first national debt in 1790. The debt primarily stemmed from expenses incurred during the Revolutionary War, when the federal government assumed the Revolutionary War debt from the states, which totaled approximately $75 million at the time. Contributing to this, the federal government has run on an annual budget deficit, again, taking in less money than it spends, 70% of the time since the inception of income tax in 1913. The last time the government brought more money in than it spent was 2001. That was 23 years ago. The next logical question is, why does our government consistently operate in a budget deficit? Peter C. Earle, senior economist of the American Institute for Economic Research, says politicians spend taxpayer dollars and encourage lofty borrowing to satisfy their constituencies, whether they are activists, corporations, foreign powers, or other interest groups. Earle goes on to say, there's no reason for any U.S. government official not to kick the can down the road, but at some indeterminate point in the future, the crushing weight of debt will come down, and whoever happens to be sitting in the Oval Office, in both houses of Congress, and in the various cabinets and agency positions in Washington, D.C., will finally have to answer for it. End quote. It really is pretty simple. When we operate in constant deficit, we continue to only pay on the interest of the debt and never pay down the actual debt. And when interest rates increase, those interest-only payments get higher. We currently spend almost 1/5 of our overall federal budget in paying the interest-only debt payments, so we never really make any progress. We are only losing ground. However, the greatest danger may be what the ever-increasing debt does for the confidence of the world at large. Many analysts believe that piling up debt will further damage the U.S. dollar's status as the global reserve currency. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned last year, testifying before the House Financial Services Committee, that one of her primary concerns is how to protect the international status of the U.S. dollar. Continued loss of confidence by other nations puts the U.S. in a bad position for it to lose its status as the currency standard used around the world. This is clearly a bipartisan issue. Both Democrats and Republicans have contributed greatly to the $35 trillion debt. In fact, the last two presidents have added $13 trillion of debt under their watch. That is 37% of the total debt. And yes, one was a Republican and one was a Democrat. At this continued pace, Bank of America analysts have warned that the U.S. debt load is ramping up to add $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. While both parties say they don't want to raise taxes overall, Democrats have proposed to raise taxes on the rich. Republicans, like Donald Trump, want to get creative by using things like mining Bitcoin or selling U.S.-produced oil. In reality, neither party wants to provide the severe budget cuts it would take to right-size the ever-growing amount of debt. There is a reality at play here. We are in an unprecedented situation. There is no good playbook. Historically, nations that have had such a debt crisis and have defaulted on their debt were never the same. Think of the Roman Empire, who once dominated at the time of Jesus. Modern nations like Argentina and Venezuela have defaulted and seen continued chaos and turmoil. And if we take a closer look at it, all nations have missed the ancient wisdom that was provided to the nation of Israel about how to think about debt and take care of its citizens. Listen to this. You shall not charge interest to your brother, interest on money or food or anything that is lent out at interest. To a foreigner you may charge interest, but to your brother you shall not charge interest, that the Lord your God may bless you in all which you have set your hand in the land which you are entering to possess. That's Deuteronomy 23, 19-20. God was very consistent about his thoughts on borrowing and lending money. Listen to this. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. That's Proverbs 22:7. And the wicked borrows and does not repay, but the righteous shows mercy and gives. That's Psalm 37:21. And Jesus had many things to say about money. He teaches how the improper handling of money, other people's money, is a heart problem and the real source of the issue. Listen to this. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you to the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. That's Luke 16:10-13. Here's the bottom line. The national debt is an important economic indicator that reflects the government's fiscal health and its ability to manage its finances over time. High national debt can influence overall economic stability. And we have talked on past episodes about the status quo and how prepared we are for a status quo change. This is one of the factors that we have to consider. Basic math says that we cannot continue to grow our national debt, especially at the rate it's going. At some point, we will have to bear the consequences. It would be great to say that our vote would change the national debt. It could, but the track record of our nation is full of politicians' promises with no actual progress getting done. It would also be great to say that it would just work itself out, but I don't think we can put our hope in that either. The one tangible thing you can do is to get your own financial house in order. Make sure you are not in a great amount of debt or operate in a budget deficit. You don't need any politicians to help you with that, and there are plenty of programs and services that can help you map out a plan. Realistically, I think it comes down to what we said in our status quo episode a few weeks ago. Jesus warned us that there would be trouble ahead. While he didn't say there was going to be a financial crisis specifically for the United States, the instability of our financial situation as a nation puts us more vulnerable to the other things that he does warn us about: wars, famines, pestilence, natural disasters like earthquakes. It takes considerable money to fight or recover from those type of things. I think that it all comes down to the same formula. Are we prepared for a time ahead where things are not as they once were? We have to abide in Jesus, trust in him, and be prepared for a time like no other. Jesus is our strong tower. He is the shelter we run to because he overcame the world, and it is through him that we overcome. Now, as we wrap up this episode, I want to give you something to think about, to meditate on or pray about. I want to challenge your heart and mind and move you out of the distracted world and give you something to really process. Okay, here we go. What can you do to prepare better for a time of economic uncertainty? How can you gain a greater amount of the ancient wisdom that God teaches that will help you in navigating your everyday life? I want to thank you for joining me on this episode. Until next time, may the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.
Thank you for being a part of this episode of the Field Journal Podcast, a production of Truth of the Kingdom. And while we've reached the end of our journey today, the conversation continues at truthofthekingdom.com. Until next time, may the kingdom story be your source of truth and hope, no matter what's happening around you.